Titans, they had several key players either leaving in free agency or they had conversations about trades, or a lot of their players were just aging in general last year in the offseason. So going into 2023, they expectedly were going to have a down year. And sure enough, as the season wore along, they ended up having a down year as they prepared for what was going to be significant change in the next offseason, which was this past offseason. They went 6-11. Ryan Tannehill ended up being replaced mainly due to injury by Will Levis, and Will Levis did okay for himself. He was a mixed bag, but that's to be expected with this kind of supporting group. But nonetheless, the Titans, they went 6-11. They were going to undergo significant change in the offseason as they were going to get ready for what was going to be a rebuild of sorts for this team. So starting with the first phase of this rebuild was a surprising change at head coach. A little bit of a surprise, I say, because Mike Vrabel wasn't honestly that bad of a head coach, but I guess they wanted to go in a different direction with whoever's going to be at quarterback. Well, I guess, yeah, the main guy was Will Levis, but you never knew. You never know because you still had Malik Willis there. So anyway, they replaced Mike Vrabel with former Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan as head coach. So he was the one that helped out Joe Burrow. Now he gets a new project in Will Levis, who's most likely going to be the starting quarterback. But yeah, again, interesting decision that they replaced Mike Vrabel. Sure, he didn't have the best years after leading the Titans to the AFC Championship in 2019 and then eventually getting the top seed in 2021. But it was a kind of curious case there, why they let him go. And then another key move that they made is that they traded for corner L'Jarius Sneed of the Chiefs in return for a 7th-round pick in this year's draft and then a 3rd-round pick in next year's draft. So they really bolstered their secondary with this move. You know, a passing defense that has struggled in the last few years, but now it gets a big boost with a proven corner in Sneed. So pretty good move if you ask me. So with the Titans, it's pretty expected for this year that you're not really going to compete for a playoff spot, barring some magic, as we've seen with a certain team within this division. But to temper expectations for this specific purpose, your goal for this year, if you're Tennessee, is, as with any other team doing a rebuild, is that you want to at least show some positive signs. You want to give your fans some hope in year one of your rebuild. You want to show some positive progress in the first year of your rebuild and why you should have fans believing that year two could be better. So looking at some of the moves that they made in the offseason, both in free agency and the draft, they lost a good amount of players, but and as a matter of fact, it was time to let them go anyway. Like running back Derrick Henry to the Baltimore Ravens, it was well apparent that in the season finale that this is going to be his last game as a Titan. So that ended up being the case a couple months later when he went over to sign as a free agent to the Ravens. They also let go Andre Dillard, the tackle to the Green Bay Packers, and they also let their center go to the Miami Dolphins as well. And then on the opposite side of the ball, they let Denico Autry go to the Texans, and so did, surprisingly, Azeez Al-Shaair. I mentioned in my season recaps that they should have made it a little bit more priority to re-sign Al-Shaair, but they didn't. That was a little bit of a surprise move there that they didn't make a commitment to sign him. Now he's on the division rival. Interesting move there. And then, of course, they let go Ryan Tannehill, who remains a free agent, but it was time to move on for him because he's been getting injured in the last 2 seasons, and his play has kind of gone downhill ever since he signed that big fat contract. So replacing all those pieces is running back Tony Pollard from the Dallas Cowboys. He had a down year last year because he broke his leg in the divisional game against the 49ers just several months prior to the season when the season started, and he didn't look the same. So maybe when he's completely healthy, he'll be more effective. But the big moves they made were at receiver, getting Calvin Ridley from the Jaguars and getting a third receiver in Tyler Boyd. That should significantly help Will Levis in his development. And so should some moves at the offensive line. Getting a good center in Lloyd Cushenberry from Denver. And then defensively, linebacker Kenneth Murray from the Chargers. And then corner Chidobe Awuzie from the Bengals. So big moves in the secondary with Chidobe Awuzie and L'Jarius Sneed. Those are two shutdown corners right there. But the work didn't stop there because when you look at the draft, they continued to address their biggest weaknesses with the offensive line, with J.C. Latham from Alabama, and then linebacker Cedric Gray from North Carolina, and then also from North Carolina, Jarvis Brownlee, and then in the trenches, Tavondre Sweat from Texas. So when you look at the Tennessee Titans this past offseason, yes, they have expected rebuild ahead, but they made plenty of upgrades all around. Because look at the moves that I mentioned, and there are several areas last year and in the year prior where they were so bad that the Titans were pretty much going nowhere. The Titans, on paper at least, they upgraded various spots just like that. Will Levis' supporting cast is going to be better. It features Tony Pollard, and then you had last year's rookie breakout, Ty J. Spears, as well as the receiving position. That offensive attack should be a lot better with Calvin Ridley there, Tyler Boyd there. And then don't forget, you also have DeAndre Hopkins. Sure, he's older, but he was the most effective player in that lacking offense. So you can't discount him as well. And then the offensive line. It was terrible in the last 2 years, but now it remains to be seen if it'll be better with all these new additions. But hey, at least they properly addressed it in some form. So we'll see how effective it will be this coming season. Defensively, they addressed the problematic secondary by grabbing, again, the two top corners from their respective teams, both whom are going to be extremely difficult to take down for opposing quarterbacks. So this team is already improved despite a rebuild ahead. So looking at some of the key games coming up for these new look Titans this season, you look at the first game on the road against the Chicago Bears, who are also going to be donning a little bit of a new look at quarterback with Caleb Williams. So an interesting first road test there for Brian Callahan and Will Levis. And then you go home to face Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Another interesting test there. And then a couple weeks later, you get a division game against the Indianapolis Colts. We'll see how the Titans are by that point, and especially much later down the season when they play the Houston Texans in Houston. So with all that being said, with all these additions made, can Will Levis take the next step in year two? Now, when I talked about Will Levis in my season recap, there are some things I liked and some things I didn't like. Now, some of that attributed to the bad offensive line, but Levis, I liked the how he expanded the passing attack. He took some big downfield risks, but then there were times where he looked a little uncomfortable, but it's a little expected when he was still a raw quarterback that it was still a rookie. But let's see how he'll do with these new additions, better protection, and an offensive-minded head coach. So it'll be interesting how he takes the next step this coming fall and as the weeks progress going into this season. So for the Titans, they blew things up this past offseason, but made some really nice upgrades to go along with it, especially with the supporting cast around Levis, some parts of their defense. But, Titans fans still need to remember, though, that the expectation of the goal is actual progress rather than hopes of a fake playoff berth. I mean, that's not to say that, maybe the Will Levis will be off the charts and then the Titans could go on an actual playoff run. But, not everyone's discern the H-Town team that's well ahead of their rebuild. But, maybe they could prove me wrong. Maybe they could prove me wrong. We'll see. There's plenty of talent on this team. But every case is different, Because considering the fact they have an extremely difficult schedule for the first half of the year, which would likely derail a lot of those hopes anyway. But who knows? Maybe they could prove me wrong. So this year, for the most part, should be about what the identity of these Tennessee Titans are. And whether Brian Callahan at head coach, Will Levis at quarterback, are going to be the right guys to lead the ship in this rebuild in the Music City.